who's been left scarred by the experience.
I've been in and out of hospital from the age of 12, and at 32 I was told I can't have my own child because of FGM, because of the operations, because of the scarring. And that's how FGM affected my life. And I still get ill. I still end up in hospital every 16 months with pelvic infection, with urine infection, with a lot of infections.
Hoda is a survivor of female genital mutilation. She was cut in the name of purity in Somalia at 8 years old. Now she's a nurse in Britain and she's worried.
There are doctors, there are cutters who are actually being paid to come to the UK to cut children. We have a child protection training every year. I work in public health. I have that training, I have to have it. I have never had FGM training.
A decade ago, it was estimated that 66,000 girls were dealing with the consequences of FGM in England and Wales. But new research published by the think tank The New Culture Forum suggests that number has more than doubled to around 170,000. The report also states that only 5% of FGM cases treated at hospitals are referred to the police.
The reason why it's important is because we can't pretend that this is something that is a rare occurrence in the UK or that only affects a handful of girls and women.
The report used the 2011 census and FOI requests to more than 160 hospitals. They are striking statistics obtained by a feminist and published by a think tank founded by the now UKIP MEP candidate Peter Whittle. He insists, though, it is not a political issue for him. But some campaigners warn figures are disparate and must be treated with caution. No one will really know numbers until records are kept as a matter of course. And even then, it will be difficult. This is a private, secret practice. FGM was made a crime in Britain in 1985, but there have been no convictions. Nearly 2 years ago, the former Director of Public Prosecutions decided to look at the situation. This has been going on for 18 months. You've been looking at this. Why does it take Britain so long to do something the likes of France and Kenya can so successfully do?
Well, I think that, as I say, there's been a problem in the past with sitting back and waiting.
It's a problem now, isn't it? Because we still don't have any prosecution.
Well, there have been a number of covert investigations, certainly in the last 12 months. As it happens, they didn't yield sufficient evidence.
Hoda thinks Britons are just too reticent.
British people are very polite. They like to stay out of things. But there is a policy that says every child matters. And every child matters, that including child who had FGM.
Well, the Home Office Minister responsible for government policy on female genital mutilation is the Liberal Democrat Norman Baker, who joins me now from Westminster. Do you accept this figure that there could be up to 170,000 victims of this crime in Britain?
Well, it may well be right, because the last calculation by the government was in 2007, which put the figure at 20,000 a year, so over a decade that would not seem to be too far out. I've actually commissioned a new study from an academic study to try to establish the prevalence of FGM in this country. That's underway at the present time.
How can it be then that there have been no prosecutions?
Well, it's very frustrating, because it's child abuse, it's an appalling practice, it's a crime, and it's not justified by any religious practice or text anywhere in the world. I think part of the reason is a reluctance to come forward by those who've had FGM carried out on them, a reluctance to provide evidence, a difficulty in securing sufficient evidence to mount successful prosecution. But clearly it is very disappointing. I know the Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, is very keen to see some prosecutions which are successful, and she's taking steps to try to secure that now.
Well, but do you have data on the number of investigations that have been mounted, or the number of victims who've been approached to give evidence when you say that, you know, there's a reluctance? I mean, in other countries they've been more successful, and you wonder if things like statutory reporting by health services or schools might go somewhere in this direction.
Well, there's partly a need to improve education, and that's underway. We've got a European Union grant to help with rolling out the message. We'll be spending money to try to make sure that all communities across the country are aware of the illegality and the fact that this is child abuse. But you're right to raise the issue of the health service. I'm actually chairing a ministerial roundtable early in February with other ministers from other departments, and we are going to look at the issues to do with the health service. I mean, quite clearly, if somebody comes into a hospital having been shot or stabbed, that's reported to the police. Well, this is child abuse, and there's a question as to whether or not those sorts of incidents should also be reported to the police regularly.
What about health checks on girls at school? That's also been tried in other countries. Would you support it?
Well, that's certainly something on the agenda. I want to take the view of colleagues in the Department for Education clearly on that matter. But my view is that when crimes are committed, we ought to try to, first of all, identify them and then prosecute those responsible.
Well, I mean, well, are you in favour of it? I'm not clear what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, it's not my department, but I understand the point you're making. There is weight behind it. There are obviously arguments about intrusion of personal space and so on, which have to be taken into account. So I will be discussing that matter with my colleagues at the Ministerial Roundtable in February.
OK, well, thanks for discussing that, but stay with us for now. And let me just tell our viewers, there is more on our website about female genital mutilation, and Fact Check have been hard at work looking at the figures. But Norman Baker, of course, you also join us tonight as a senior Liberal Democrat, and your party is in an almost unique position, tearing itself apart. We've got your former leaders all over the airwaves. David Steele, arguing over the Renard affair. David Steele says his suspension should be cancelled. Paddy Ashdown, another former leader, supports it. Where are you?
I'm busy looking after my constituents in Lewis and busy dealing with my job in the Home Office. That's my priorities. Fortunately, I don't have to get involved in this particular matter.
What, so you don't have an opinion on this at all? I mean, this is a crisis for your party, isn't it? I mean, you can't duck it that easily.
I don't think it's a crisis. I think it's not a satisfactory position, but I'm not going to get involved in that matter. I think, to be honest with you, the least said, soonest mended.
Well, do you support your leader? Can you say that? I mean, do you support Nick Clegg?
I generally support Nick Clegg. I think he's a very good leader of the party.
Do you support Nick Clegg specifically on the Renard affair, that he is right to have made sure that he is currently suspended and that he must apologise before coming back to the party?
I think Nick has got a very difficult job to do, and he's wrestling with standing orders put in place a long time ago in opposition, which aren't really fit for purpose within the party. So I certainly support Nick. I think he's a very good leader.
So you think he's doing the right thing?
I think he's making the best of the difficult situation he has.
Well, you're dodging the question a little bit. It's quite simple. Is he doing the right thing or not?
He's doing the best he can under the circumstances.
The best he can. All right. Well, Norman Baker, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Okay.